to go. Let me see my slides here. I'm gonna here.
Ele quer que comece a falar uma coisa só para registrar. Eu falo olhando para lá, né?
Aqui na web.
Posso falar aqui? Rodolfo, my dear, thank you so much for coming. We're starting the presentation via YouTube. So your presentation will be also on YouTube.
Oh my goodness. Do I need to really? You're scaring me now. Will you let me know when the recording starts?
Okay, we're starting.
Is this live?
Live. That's what I
For the other student.
Okay, let me just test first the presentation before you can do anything of recording. Okay.
Okay, we'll start. And before we start, I'll say some words so they'll know that we're starting this fifth presentation of the forum. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. This should be here.
Oh, look at how beautiful. Don't forget to say.
Yeah, so I might be, I don't know if you can really gonna, I guess you see my slides, right?
Yes.
We do.
Yeah, okay. So I have two monitors. So my camera is in one side and my slides on the other side. So if I don't see directly to the camera, it's because it's not ignoring you. It's trying to keep up with my slides. So yeah, let me know when you want to start the recording, I guess. And then I am sure you say you want to do some intro before, Emilia?
Okay, sorry. Okay. So did you start? Yeah. Okay. I was trying to make that everyone, you'll see everyone that's here. Professor Barbara is here too.
Oh, I see. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I can see now more people.
Well, welcome, Dr. Rodolfo. We're so happy to have you here. You have been an inspiration for our course since 2013, I think, when I visited you guys for the first time at CSU in Colorado. And I learned about the videos your student made about social sustainability in your course, and it inspired us to create this class, which is called Advanced Topics on Sustainability. And since I was there this year and I was so close to you, I wanted very much for the students to learn from you and to see and experience the advantage of listening and having your classes. So I want to thank you for giving us your time and sending us a little bit the taste of studying in the US at CSU. Rodolfo, I want to say also that we are signing our agreement. I have sent to the president of the university, so it's very good that we have that now collaboration also signed. And Professor Rodolfo is an expert on the area of social sustainability applied to construction projects. His PhD was in this area, and I'll let him introduce himself and talk about this subject. Thank you, Rodolfo, and the word is yours.
Well, thank you, Emilia, for those kind words. I do appreciate it. And yes, we have been collaborating for almost 10 years since you came here as a visitor scholar back in 2013. We connect, and you invite me for one of your classes. So really excited to be part of this class and show you a little bit of the progress we have done in social sustainability through these 10 years. So I'm gonna show you a couple examples of things that are happening here in the United States. I did try to find a couple projects in Brazil, but I was unsuccessful. Actually, I speak Spanish, but I don't speak Portuguese. So I was not really able to find good projects to showcase, but I'm sure Emilia can give you an assignment to find new projects based on the ones that we are going to be talking about today. So again, thank you for having me. I do appreciate it. For the ones looking at this through YouTube, hey, this is nice to be connecting in these other ways I wasn't expecting today. So I I changed a little bit the title because we don't have enough time to really deep dive into what social sustainability is. So I just this is like an intro to social sustainability in construction projects, and sometimes might feel like I am throwing you a lot of ideas to you, but I also giving you a lot of resources for you to look through. So I'm gonna share my slides with Emilia later on, so you can have access to them. And then you're gonna notice that in a couple of the slides there is links to either a website or videos, so you can play those, get more information about these projects. So let's start here with so this is my roadmap for today. Gonna give you a little bit of intro, and also I want you to engage a little bit. So I'm gonna be asking you questions through the presentation, and, and hopefully you're gonna answer those by yourself, and then we can chat about what your answers are compared with my answers. Also, I want to inspire you to be thinking about how can you be a better, or not better, but thinking about how can you enhance your design or building mindset. I know some of you are more in the design perspective. Some of you probably will be more looking into uh, constructing or building something in the future. So thinking about what is the mindset that you need to have besides these technical skills that you already acquire or are currently acquiring in terms of energy efficiency or construction estimating or scheduling. What else you should be thinking about to really create these type of sustainable projects. And when I refer to sustainable projects later, you're going to see my definition, and that definitely includes social sustainability. Which bring me to I will discuss about what social sustainability is from my point of view. And then I am sure Emilia later could tell you more about the work that we have been doing lately about thinking about social sustainability in terms of communities. How can we enhance not only energy efficiency, but also thinking about their comfort in their houses? So we did a project couple of years ago. So Emilia, I'm sure can tell you more about that. And one of the things I want you to think about too during this presentation is about this concept of stakeholders, which I don't know how that you translate in Portuguese, but is this concept about who are the people that are affected by the construction project. And sometimes there is different type of peoples, and we only think about typically the owner, the occupants, but there is more people that are affected by a construction project. So you need to think about them too when you are really thinking about social sustainability. Gonna show you a couple case studies. Most of them are, I tried to find a couple from different countries, but most of them are from the United States. But yeah, just to have a reference, like I say, I think it would be important for you after this presentation, and depending of your class, is to start thinking about your own local context and see how these concepts might already being applied in Brazil or in your region. Thinking about how you can enhance those in your country. And we can have QA after if enough time is available at the end. By the way, this picture that you see in this slide is a picture in one of our buildings on campus, and we have we call this was one of our first LEED Platinum projects on campus, and have a green wall. So that's what you see here. Hopefully you know about LEED already. If not, we can discuss that later. LEED is a rating system for green buildings. So a little bit of myself, since Emilia say I should introduce myself. So I am originally from Panama City, Panama. I got my bachelor's degree in civil engineering with a focus on construction. Then I worked for a transportation company doing kind of transportation consulting work. Also, I worked for an institution in Panama doing kind of teaching instruction about civil engineering. Then I decided to get my degree in construction science and management. That was always one of my passions. Um, and then after that, one of my main things I did during my master's in science was to focus on construction safety. So when I went back to Panama, I developed a whole construction safety course. I also did some work with some of the construction companies in Panama to develop their safety programs in Panama. And then I really enjoyed doing a lot of research, which I wasn't expecting to. So for those students doing the master's degree, you never know, right? When you start doing your research, you start thinking about other ways of thinking. So I decided to do my PhD at Clemson again and got my PhD in civil engineering with a focus on uh, sustainable construction. So that's kind of my degrees. I put here a couple of my other things I've been doing, but I have been here at CSU for 10 years now as at the beginning assistant professor and now an associate professor. Um, so being really excited to be here at CSU and working on this type of projects that are thinking about how can we enhance what we are doing in the construction industry and also in the higher education system. So what my goals for you today is that I would like you to increase your motivation about the topics of sustainable design and construction in general, specifically about social sustainability. I also want you to think about this as a global uh, topic, not just a local one. And then I think some of the issues that we see in our local regions or our own cities are things that are happening everywhere if you start analyzing what's happening around the world. Um, so I want you to start making those connections too. And then in some way, while I am not going to be diving into the human-centered design process, I would like you to think about how it's important to get um, the feedback from the people that are going to be using these projects. And not only the feedback from the owner, the design team, or the builders, but also the feedback from the final users, for the workers that are going to be building that project, for the community around that project, and for some others that you might not be thinking about yet. So that's kind of something that I really want you to get from this presentation today. And then I have the first question for you, but before I ask that question, is everything okay? I just want to double check that we are good.
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks for the thumbs up. So my first question for you, just spend 1 minute really quick. What are the world's biggest problems based on your own perspective? Just think about in 1 minute, maybe write it down in your notes. And think about what are the world's biggest problems in just 1 minute, and then I'm gonna share with you some of my ideas. And then when you feel you're good, just give me a thumbs up. And don't overthink it. Just what you think are the world's biggest problems. We feel we're good? Does somebody want to share? One of the students, probably? Don't be shy.
I wrote down global collaboration. We need to strengthen it, and solid waste. We produce a lot of solid waste and carbon emissions.
Carbon emissions. Okay, good. Anybody else? Other people that?
Philip said poverty. I think extreme differences.
Extreme poverty.
Yeah.
Okay.
I put lack of access to education, health, infrastructure, and housing.
Okay, those are great. So thank you for sharing. So now I'm gonna tell you what the Gen Z and millennials say that they were facing in 2022. And this is a survey that is conducted across the world. And they came out with this list of their biggest problems they have currently based on their generation point of view. So you can see here a lot of different issues, especially, I guess, after the pandemic, a lot of mental issues happening in some of these. And you can see the difference between one group and another group. And for some of you that probably are not familiar with this concept of Gen Z and millennials, which are always in the news, but Gen Z are the new generation that is coming to our colleges, and the millennials are almost already, almost, I think, there's in the productive point of view of working in the industry. So one other thing I want to point out from this list is that you see climate change in one list as a number 6 and in the other list as a number 7. And that probably doesn't really connect right now to sustainability, but it has a lot of connection to sustainability, the concept of climate change. So I want to point out that this is a poll that was based on last year, and you have the link there so you can find more information about that. And then I want to show you this other list. This is the list from Richard Smiley's. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago, but he was an eminent researcher, and he has his own list, and at the top of his list was energy. And the reason he say energy was at the top of the list is because it has a lot of connection to the problems that we are facing currently in terms of population growth, concept of education, as Amelia mentioned. Also, we are facing a lot of issue with food production, sometimes food waste in some cases, poverty. Some of you mentioned that too. So just to give you a different perspective here, that sometimes when we think about these world biggest problems, there is a lot of connections that if we solve something such as energy in this case, based on Richard's list, we could be solving a lot of other problems too. So when we are thinking about sustainability in general, we need to think about the interdependence of these problems. So that's something that is important to understand. Maybe you are really into buildings or into highway projects, but all those projects are created because there is a need or a necessity, and that need or necessity will solve problems for the population that you are serving. So you need to think about that. What is that need? Unfortunately, we don't have time to watch the video, but I just want to point out that when you get the slides, you're going to have a link, and you're going to see this short video and the perspective of research about why he say energy was the biggest problems. He was a great person that was thinking about this long time ago before some of us. So I want to point out her. From my perspective, I think it's all about people, and that's the reason I focus on social sustainability. If I can start giving you a definition about social sustainability, it's about people in general. And if we think about population growth, right? Last year we had 7 billion people in the planet, and we are expecting to keep growing. So all these people will need to have resources to live. All these people need to have food, shelter, and so many other things. And sometimes when we start thinking about population growth, we need to think about where is that population growth is happening. And sometimes we see countries that want to look into what has been developed in other developed nations, and they want to have that same standard. And sometimes what the developed nations has created is not the best way to go in terms of sustainable approach. So sometimes you have a better solution for sustainability than what you are thinking. For instance, here in the United States, yes, there is a great research, great new ways to think about sustainability, but at the same time, there has been a lot of projects that never thought about it. So you really have to be challenging what is out there, and sometimes you have a better solution in your own local region compared with taking something from other places, right? For those of you that have been studying sustainability, you know that sustainability is all about location, location, location. So the solutions that you can implement, for instance, here in Colorado, because our climate dominated by the winter, is different than the solution probably you can implement in a place like in Pernambuco, right? You don't get snow, so your design features will be totally different compared with what we get here. So you really need to think about that location plus the resources that you have available in that area. Some of you mentioned climate change or CO2 emissions. When we talk about those big topics, we need to think about what they mean, right? In terms of CO2 emissions, we have the embodied carbon from the materials that we use to build these facilities or the infrastructure, but also we have the operational carbon that is going to be there based on the energy is going to be used, the materials that we're going to replace in the future. So we need to think about all that carbon in the long term, not just at the beginning of the project. I hope that makes sense. Any questions so far? Good. So this, I kind of steal this from one of my collaborators from Ecuador. So Enrique, if you ever see this, thank you. I steal this from you. But I think it gives you a perspective of why we are thinking about population as at one point of thinking through the solutions we not create depending on the projects. So you normally most of the population that we see grow is in big cities, right? LA, Mexico City, we have other areas like Dubai, Mumbai, Cape Town, in different part of the world. You also have a lot of population growth, and there is a lot of challenges, right? You have these beautiful projects that are being built, but also there is a lot of insecurity, is a lot of homelessness in those big cities. I didn't want to miss Brazil. I didn't find any picture from Pernambuco, but I found something about Sao Paulo, Brazil, that also have a lot of population growth. And probably you know better than what I know. But yeah, you have these big contrasts, you know, these big cities with these beautiful projects, high rises, and at the same time, you can see the poverty next to it, right? And that happens everywhere. So the problems, the issues that you might be seeing in your own context are happening in other places too. And then when we think about sustainable projects, and we're going to talk about that definition later, is does a sustainable project is by itself, or does a sustainable project really think about the community around, right? So I will argue that just by having a high rise with a high energy efficiency building and low CO2 emissions based on the materials, but doesn't create a benefit for the community around that building, probably is not a sustainable project. The other example I give to my students all the time is when you have these huge projects that are created with these sustainable, well, I will call green goals, and then you have accidents or people that are get hurt or injured or sometimes die in those projects. Is that really a sustainable project? Probably not, right? Somebody have been hurt in that project. So you really need to think hard about what that concept of sustainable construction is in this context. So something for you to think, to consider. Um, so you probably have learned this since you were in your bachelor's in science. Emilia, could you let me know, most of the students are masters or PhD students? I forgot.
Most are masters, but we have three
Ma-
undergraduate and the rest
Okay,
are.
perfect. So for those undergrads, probably you are already learning this. For the master students, you probably already know this. But when we think about construction project life cycle, we start thinking about all the phases that construction projects go through. Unfortunately, sometimes in our programs, we only focus on the construction phase, or sometimes in the design phase. But we tend to forget that there is a planning phase that's really key. And then the most important phase I also trying to challenge my students to think about is the operation and maintenance of the project. Why is that? Well, in some cases, if you do post occupancy evaluations, that will be awesome to do. Getting that feedback about what happened in the operational maintenance phase and then providing that feedback to the planning phase. But normally, your ability to make changes is higher when you are in the early phases, planning and design phase. When you go through construction, operation, and maintenance, yes, you can make changes, but they're going to cost you a lot of money. And then it's going to create some conflict sometimes with your client, with the rest of the stakeholders in that project. So the best time to start thinking about sustainability practices and features in any construction project is early in the planning and design phase. Even if you're just trying to focus on construction, you really need to think about that without forgetting that in the operation and maintenance phase, there's going to be a lot of other things that are going to happen that are going to be affecting the performance of that building. So the other thing I want you to think about, because some of you mentioned the concept of health in the terms of the world biggest problems, and I think now we are more aware of that based on the pandemic, is that health is something that we tend to forget is connected to what we build, what materials we use in our offices, in our homes, in the spaces that we spend time on. Here in the United States, we spend probably 95% inside compared with outside. So you can see that sometimes the type of furniture that you use, the type of paints that you use is going to be affecting the health of those occupants, right? Or the type of mechanical systems, air conditioning system that you're using. By the way, our building is close to a train road, train track, and the train is coming through. So you're gonna hear the train in a minute. It's pretty loud. So I might stop for a minute actually to make sure that doesn't interrupt my presentation. But uh, so this was part of my inspiration when I was doing my doctoral program more than 10 years ago, is thinking about that when we are thinking about the concept of sustainability, we normally focus on these phases of planning, design, and construction, but we will should be expanding our house to a bigger house. And that bigger house need to include the whole project life cycle. And also we need to think about the economics, the environmental, and the social part. And that was something that was not being considered too much probably 10, 15 years ago. I think nowadays we see more people really honing those skills about social sustainability. Um, there is a paper related to this that I'm gonna give you the reference later. Okay, the train is going through. Can you hear it? No? Probably not. But we're gonna go through this really quick since I want to just give the examples to spend time on that and your questions. But when we think about the impacts of construction or the built environment, even buildings or infrastructure, we covered this already. We need to think about where is this happening in terms of where the project is located, what is going to happen in the design phase, what's going to happen in the construction phase, what are the things that need to be replaced during operation and maintenance, how often they need to be replaced, what's going to happen at the end of the project life cycle. Are we going to be deconstructing the building? Are we going to be renovating the building? Are we going to be doing some type of retrofitting? So what's going to happen with that building is important to consider. Plus, we need to think about, and this is where it's important to consider the operation and maintenance phase, is the consumption of a building or a facility or infrastructure. There is a lot of energy that is going to be consumed: water, materials, natural resources, which we don't have plenty of them for all the projects and all this population that is growing in our different countries. And then, yes, we need to have these inputs to build these projects and these resources, but also there is going to be some environmental effects based on that project. We see a lot of waste. Some of you mentioned about the problems with waste in your region or in where you were thinking has one of the biggest problems. We see a lot of air pollution, and think about where the material is coming from, how the material was created in the manufactory, what are the contaminations of those materials. We have a lot of water pollution, water contamination in some cases, indoor pollution. If you are part of a big city, you probably notice this effect of the heat island effect, right? The temperatures is higher in a bigger city that is made of a lot of concrete compared with if you live in the countryside. So those fluctuations of temperatures is going to be affecting the people that are living in that city. And then we have seen these in multiple occasions, the effects of the storm water runoff that can create floodings and issues, erosion control, contamination to lakes, rivers, any body of water nearby. And definitely construction projects are noticeable for noise. And that's a type of contamination and effect that we don't talk too much about, but it's important to consider that, especially when you're in the construction phase or when you're thinking about installing an equipment that is going to generate a lot of noise for the occupants. So you need to think about that too. And then ultimate the effects of construction, which we love construction, right? But at the same time, we need to be mindful that, yes, construction creates some effects that are not good for the environment, are not good for the people. And so we need to think about how can we minimize those effects? How can we minimize the degradation of the natural resources that we are using to build these projects? So those are just a big picture about thinking about the impacts of the built environment. So I have another question for you. So I'm going to ask you to think about this for, I would say, 30 seconds. This will be a short one. So you probably have been learning about design or construction processes. So maybe you can think about how can you solve these biggest problems, right? I probably have not given you the best introduction ever to be positive, but yeah, there is possibility on this. But yeah, what you would think we need to have to solve these complex problems? Let me give you a minute because probably this is will take you a little bit more time. Does that question make sense? Or should I rephrase it? Thumbs up. So maybe let's do this. Maybe pair with somebody near to you and come up with a process that you think is going to be good to solve these biggest problems. I'm going to give you a minute. Just find somebody nearby, discuss it, and then I'm going to ask you questions. Okay, just checking how we are doing. Do we have kind of an answer? Doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to know. Do we have something to share?
Yeah, she was talking about the sustainable construction as a solution, but then she might enter into the water, the use of water, energy efficiency, the use of materials, to have more green areas.
Okay.
We use natural resources.
Does we have somebody else to also share?
Would you thought about pre-molded construction using pre-molded pieces? So it's gonna be
Prefabricated modular.
Prefabrication. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think I got it.
because it's gonna be quicker to build those things. We're gonna use less energy, less water, and it's probably gonna be better for the construction team based on security on the site, safety.
Safety. Okay, perfect. Okay, good. I guess, is anybody else that want to share?
She's talking about the use of beam and sustainable indicators through construction.
So having sustainable indicators in the process to measure what if you're achieving your goals. Oh, I like that. Yeah, thanks for sharing. So yeah, this question is, I'm hearing an echo, probably, maybe, yes, perfect. Thank you for muting. I was hearing myself twice. So this question is just to allow you to think about that sometimes when we start asking about how to improve things, our first solution always is to build new things or to find new things to build. But one of the things I've been learning from my connections with other researchers in this area is that sometimes the best solution is not to build. And what we mean by that, which is sometimes you already have a project or you already have something that doesn't need to be have a new construction process. We think about home, for instance, like, do you really need a home or for having 3 rooms, 3 bathrooms? What you need a space for? So I think these days with the new generation, Gen Z, millennials, we have noticed that their mindset about the spaces that they need and what they need for is different than the previous generations. So you really need to think about, do you really need a new construction, or what is the purpose of the space that you're trying to build, and what are the purpose of the solutions? And sometimes the solution is not to build. Right? You can find other ways to solve that problem that you need to solve or that need. So I'm just gonna put it out there because that's something that I have been learning in the last couple of years that when we are thinking about construction, we always are thinking about building new things, new things, new things. And sometimes the best way to do it is not to build anything, just to find a new way to solve that problem. So just a food for thought for you. You might be telling me later about that idea, but I think it's important to share that. So let me move here. So, and this is something I want you to start thinking about is what is this new mindset about design and building? What we need to be thinking about. Definitely with the introduction, the point was that these problems are occurring in every place, every country, every region. And things are becoming more complex in terms of social issues. So we need to address those with our construction projects, even if you like it or not. The focus on people is really important and the relationships with the ecosystem that they have. We have seen, you notice in some of the millennial responses, Generation Z responses, says about their biggest problems sometimes are mental health issues. Having a project, a building, or infrastructure that is not connected to a natural ecosystem can create more mental health issues. Um, Having that connection to nature helps the human body to heal. So you really need to start thinking about these other connections, not only connections about materials in a construction project. You really need to think about getting feedback from other community members, from the occupants that are going to be part of that project for you construction workers to how to improve. So that's the concept of human-centered design. You really need to be thinking about what are your local resources and how can you use those local resources to enhance your project instead of bringing materials from other places that are going to generate more CO2 emissions, right? And are going to increase the cost of the project. So sometimes you have solutions that you can implement based on your own local resources, and that is going to help you in terms of cost too, because I know that's a question that every client, any owner is going to ask you is how much is going to cost me this, right? So having look at those resources availability in your context is always important. And then the other piece, and this is connected to location, is you need to understand what are the site characteristics of your building or your infrastructure, and what is the impact of that not only locally but also globally, right? How many times we have seen the connections into one project that is being built in one area, but that project is affecting so many other places across the world. So we need to start making those connections. So um, you as a designer, as a builder, need to start thinking about all these issues. They're all interrelated. It's not anymore about how much it costs the project, how much time the project is going to be, and the quality. Is about thinking about these other issues that are going to be affecting the development of a sustainable project, right? If you want to still do the traditional approach, yeah, probably you will not be thinking about this at all. But if you're really truly thinking about sustainable construction project, you have to be considering all these concepts. And again, they are complex. So one person probably is not going to solve all of those, but you have a team. And that's the reason that most of the successful projects that we have seen are based on having a diverse group of people working on those projects. So that's something that you're going to see later in some of the examples that I'm going to show you. Any questions about this? Should I expand on something? We good? Thank you. So, and this is, I'm going to mention this really quick, but this is based on this concept of somebody mentioned about CO2 emissions. So when you're thinking about CO2 emissions, if you are thinking about the ecosystem that provides materials or energy or water for the building, you really need to think about where are they coming from. right? How far they are from that project, because that is going to impact your CO2 emissions and the type of materials that you're using, right? Sometimes we have the selection of concrete versus steel, the selection of wood versus your composite materials. So when you are deciding the selection of materials in the design phase, you really need to think about not only about the beauty of the material, right, which most of the time that's what we're thinking about, or the functionality of the material, but you also need to think about what is the impact in my CO2 emissions. Where is that material coming from? Right? So that's going to have an impact. And definitely, I know there's people that argue, well, I use concrete or I use the steel because I am not going to be replacing that material for more than 50 years, 75 years. So you also need to think about the life cycle analysis of that material. So as an internal piece. And something else that you need to think about besides CO2 emissions is what is the impact of those materials in the health and the social well-being of the occupants of the building or even the construction workers. It's amazing the amount of materials that we use that create harms to our construction workers, and we don't think about that at all when we are selecting those materials, or the people specifying those materials in the design phase. They don't think about what is the impact of an epoxy that the construction workers need to use to connect or to polish something in that construction process. So you need to think about that when you're thinking about these ecosystem services. The other concept I want to mention, a big fan of Dr. Annie Pierce from Virginia Tech. She has been instrumental in my research, especially when we think about stakeholders in the construction process, is that we need to think about these stakeholders across the life cycle of a construction project. Most of the time when we think about stakeholder, we only think about the client, the design team, the contractor or the occupants, if we think about them, depending on the type of project that you're using. But there is a lot of other people that are involved in a construction project that we need to be thinking about uh, and consulting when we are developing these solutions. Even if you're just focusing on one phase of the construction project, like for instance, the design phase, you really need to think about what's going to happen with this project in the next 50 years and how the consequences are for my solution today for the next 50 years, right? Like the selection of a window type will have a bigger impact in the energy efficiency of the building, right? But also it's going to be having a big impact in the comfort of the occupants of that building in the next 50 years, whoever those occupants are. So you need to think about that. Again, this slides is going to be shared with you, so you have more details about these ones. So here you go. Here's the definition after more than 30 minutes of the discussion. So when we talk about sustainability, we need to think about, yes, this ecological development piece. We normally see sustainability as these three spheres interconnected: the economic, the environmental, and then the social part. I have been challenging myself to think about in a different way. I see them inside. We only have one planet, so we only have one environment. That right. The economic development could look so different compared with what we used to see in the past. Now I see a lot of communities trying to leverage their resources. So it's not anymore just about money, but also being happy with what you have in your own community. So that economic development can be different in different contexts. So yes, so we have one planet. Every community will have a different style of economic development. And we also need to develop our people in those communities. So for me, they are in the core of this bigger ecosystem, right? We will not survive without the planet, but at the same time, we will not progress if we don't have some type of economic development. And what we are thinking about economic development these times is more having the circular economy, like whatever we use in one space could be uh, benefiting somebody else in another space. So this concept of circular economy is becoming more important these days compared with in the past. We talk about the economic development of having more money, more money, more money, and that was it. I think we are rethinking that process of development. So if you want to have a definition for sustainable construction, well, Dr. Kiver, we unfortunately also passed away a year ago. Um, he was one of the first gurus about sustainable construction here in the United States. So he proposed this definition about creating the creation and responsible management of healthy built environment based on the resources that are available and the ecological designs, which I really like. So for me, when I talk about sustainable construction, is just the application of the sustainable development into the construction industry, to keep it simple, to be honest with you. So, um, and now if we focus on social sustainability, actually, this is probably not a new concept. Maybe it's new to you today if you hear it for the first time, but it has been in development from multiple years. When I started doing my research, I leaned to previous researchers that were looking at this, understanding what social sustainability meant to different areas. For me, it was important to define it in an easy way, and the best way I came up across was with thinking about people in the construction industry. And when we think about people, we need to think about stakeholders, and that's the reason I mentioned to you that other chart created by Dr. Annie Pierce is that there is multiple stakeholders in different phases of the construction project. So you need to think about all these people that are part of a construction project, even those people that probably are not going to use never that project, but they're going to be impacted because they're nearby or because the materials where the construction materials where you're going to be using for that building are impacting that community where that material are going to be created, harvested, or developed. So somebody mentioned about prefabrication, right? We're trying to move now to prefabrication to minimize safety hazards, make a more quality control product. But what is the impact of that uh, uh, place where that prefabricated material is going to have in those communities around them? So I don't think so we are getting there yet, but we also need to think about that. So your building is not anymore just this building. Now the building also need to be connected to where the prefabricated material is coming from. I hope that makes sense. Yes. So if you want to be a little bit more technical, this is why I came up as a part of my research. I define social sustainability as a series of processes that need to be in place to improve safety, health, well-being during the life cycle of a construction project. And now we have seen it more and more. Well-being is something that we were never thinking about before. We probably were considering safety and health, but well-being is so important for a construction project, construction facility. So you need to think about that in the life cycle of the project, not only during the construction phase. So I'm going to show you this really quick. I have moved away from some of these. And I'm going to show you my results of some of my research in a minute. But I start with this conceptualization of social sustainability based on what I noticed when I was doing my research 10 years ago. There were a lot of people talking about social sustainability, but in different ways. So I tried to cluster those in these 4 big categories. And you can see the definitions here and who were the people talking about these concepts. But what I decided to do is, instead of dividing these in different areas, how about we can better understand it and combine this information and came up with a different framework. So this is my framework, and the reference is here in the slide, so you can read more in that paper. But normally when we think about how to apply social sustainability in a practical way, the first thing that we need to think about is to how we are going to be doing this, right? Because it's complex. There is multiple stakeholders that you need to engage. So that's the reason that the first thing that you need to think about is how you're going to engage with those stakeholders. What is the process that you're going to follow to collect feedback? And that's another reason I really kind of these days proposing about the concept of human-centered design, because human-centered design is looking into how can we get feedback from the people that are going to be affected by the design that or the project that we're going to build, collecting that feedback, understanding their needs, understanding their own solutions that sometimes are better than the solutions that we think as a designers we could implement, because we are not living in those communities. We are not understanding the day-to-day life. We don't understand what the economic development looks like. So that stakeholder engagement is really important. So, and you can see here a couple other things in that stakeholder engagement, but the other piece I want you to think about when you are starting this process is what is the project considerations. And what I mean by that is what type of project delivery system you're going to use. We have seen that for sustainable projects, the traditional design bid build process is not the best approach sometimes to do a sustainable project. We are more doing a design build process where you are collaborating more with the design team and the construction team. So you are minimizing issues, you are discussing, you're on the same table early on to minimize any problems in the future. You also thinking about creating a project team that is diverse enough to understand these all issues. Like I mentioned earlier on, having one person to solve all the problems is impossible. So you need to have a team that is really diverse, that can challenge some of your notions and can support these solutions. And the other things that we need to think about early on is to having these concepts about zero harm, zero accidents targets for construction projects, because I know it's a big deal in so many cities, other countries that sometimes don't follow specific safety regulations. So you really need to think about that one. So that's kind of the beginning. And then somebody mentioned indicators, which was great. So you also need to think about the assessment piece. How are you going to assess that you are doing the right thing in the right moment, right? So you also need to think about health impact assessment, social impact assessment. So there is different ways to do those. You need to do this through the life cycle of the construction project. And then the last thing is thinking about what are your sustainable outcomes, right? In terms of uh, health, transparency, productivity, equity in a construction project. Those are things that are becoming more relevant these days. How are you going to follow up with whatever you built and check that is making the right uh, performance according to what you're saying. So there is a lot of discussions about how can we be more transparent, how can we educate, how can we use our buildings or infrastructure to educate the general public about what sustainable is. So you see a lot of projects, a lot of new rating systems thinking that way, which is really great. And then while you see this as a linear process in this slide, actually this is not linear. This is a lot of going back and forth, similar to when we do design of any construction project. There is different phases. There is a lot of discussions to come out with the best solution possible. So in this practical guide, I try to be mindful about that process too. It's like, yes, I can start with my approach, but I should not forget about what is my final outcome of that project. And also I need to be doing my assessment. So it's going back and forth in so many ways. So before I move on to examples, I wanna, is any questions so far? Good, thank you. So I'm gonna give you now a couple examples from different areas. I know we have probably like 10, 15 minutes. So this first one is from Costa Rica. I do a study abroad program in Costa Rica. And so we learned about this project in one of our visits. And this was a police station in one specific community called Leon 13. Um, and you can see here, now the traditional, to be honest, police station. I don't know how the police stations are in Brazil, but this is kind of what was traditional in Costa Rica. And I can relate to this type of construction similar to what I saw in Panama in some of those local communities. But you can imagine if this is the police station and there is a community here, and there is only one main entrance, and you're gonna have people that are gonna be in jail, but also the person that is gonna be coming here to put like a situation or discuss a situation. Everybody knew who was coming into the place, right? By just having an entrance, it doesn't look inviting at all to come to this place, right? So um, the design team that was in charge of renovating this place came up with the idea of inviting the community members to provide their solutions about that new station. And this is what they came up in terms of renderings after multiple discussions. There were different entrances for different people. They want to keep like a safety environment for the community too. So they could come up with ideas of, uh, the typical pavement. If you see here is all concrete in the front, but then in the front now you can see these concrete blocks that minimize the runoff of the water. Also have enough space if somebody was disabled to get access. You didn't see this staircase anymore. So everything is easy to access. So thinking about disability for the design phase. And also in this floor plan, you can see more spaces for the people, for the community to come in to talk with the police department, and also spaces for yell and other things. But this was something that changed their mindset in terms of how police serve communities. Sometimes we have this notion that the police department is used there for security, but also the police department can enhance a community and support that community. So this is one of the examples I really love about what they came up with after having those discussions with the community members. So the design team was not coming up with their own solution. The design team asked the community what the solution should be. I hope that helped you to understand when we are thinking about this concept of social sustainability and engaging with people, this is what we should be trying to do. I am not saying this is the perfect solution, but at least for this community, the members of that community, they felt that they were heard about their possible solutions, right? And this other project is coming from Rwanda. This is a nice book if you have the opportunity to get access to it. I would thoroughly recommend it, especially if you're into the design spaces for justice and beauty. And this specific one is a primary school in Rwanda. And this, it was a challenging site. You can see here the different levels. This was the site they have, and they decided to use the local materials they have in that region for building their primary school. There is a lot of heat in this area, so instead of using right air conditioner units, they try to ventilate the area with natural ventilation instead of using more resources, right? Thinking about the best way to build something is probably not building it or not using some type of assistant technology. So this was part of their project, and you can see here the beauty of the primary school, right? It might feel like this is low key compared with other fancy projects, but this was the perfect solution for that community, asking them using the local resources, making the students happy in their learning environment. You can see all this natural light coming through, right? Being engaged with that process of education in this case. So this is one I really also love from this book, and there is multiple other examples, but this is something I will strongly suggest if you have the opportunity to get into this book, please do. You're gonna be amazed by the type of design they created based on the resources they have and engaging with the community. This other project is in Virginia, here in the United States, the state of Virginia, and this project was created using this equity mindset in the design and construction process. The United Service Organization is a nonprofit organization that supports veterans. And then in this case, you can see here how the space, it feels welcoming, open, and also support those veterans that have been wounded in the past. They have a space where they can share their experiences and they can access to. I think sometimes access to spaces is something that we tend to forget because most of us in design and construction projects, we don't have any disabilities and we tend to forget that other people might need to access these spaces. So one of the things I love from this particular case study is the use of the concepts of universal design. We normally have principles, and these principles are focusing on making sure that the space is equitable, flexible, the space is simple to use, intuitive. And I think that's one of the, like we have seen it, right, with our cell phones, right, with the iPhone, one of the first one that came out with everything was intuitive to use. So the same way should happen in our construction, buildings and infrastructure. It should be really intuitive to use. You should have enough tolerance for error, but a low physical effort in this case. So these are things that I think is important to start understanding because allow you to create a better design for people that sometimes we don't consider in our cases. I think the last example I'm going to show you, since we are running out of the time, is this one. This is another beautiful building, but with behind story that is amazing. And this is the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. If you ever visit DC, Washington, DC, you definitely should check it out. It really teach you a lot about history and the struggles of our brothers from African cultures in here coming to the United States. But also it teaches you about how can you develop a building that supports different builders, different suppliers, vendors that typically were not on the table. So this is a good example for when you're thinking about having a project that needs to include minority contractors or vendors. They did a great job with that, making sure that when you are hiring your subcontractors, your suppliers, you are thinking about the diversity of those. And sometimes we don't think about that. We just look for the cheapest or the lowest cost. And we don't think about the opportunities that we can offer to these other contractors to enhance the current process. The link here is for you to look more for, again, a beautiful building, but the more beautiful part is the process that they use to engage with different stakeholders that in the past were not engaged in this process, right? I think probably this is one of my last slides, is that there is so many things happening that is impossible to cover using 1 hour. But I left these slides here for you to think about. There is already organizations here in the United States that are providing guides for equitable practices. So the American Institute of Architects have these guides. Also, the American Society of Civil Engineers has created a whole series about social equity in infrastructure, if you are more into the infrastructure side, so you can look at those. And I want to be mindful too about your context. Some of these issues probably doesn't really apply to your context, but at least you can start thinking about maybe how can I adapt it to my Brazilian context, right? If this is applicable or not. So I have a last question for you before we go and open it up for QA. So after all this, which I throw you a lot of information to you, what is the role of designers and builders? What do you think is the roles of designers and builders after looking at all these perspectives? I'm gonna give you a minute. And you can have a pair, you can discuss it between two people to make it easier. So I'm gonna ask you again to provide your feedback, and I'm gonna mute myself so we don't hear the echo. Okay. So.
So we thought about both the designers and builders need to communicate with the communities where the building is going to be constructed. So maybe they will have some issues that they can solve contacting the people that live over there, close to the place where the building is going to be built. And they need to consider the impact that the building is going to apply on that community. And the builders need to know where they get the materials from. So maybe they can help another community or the community close to the building with the community giving the material, some sort of like that. the designers need to know, both need to know if what is that they really need to build. Is that necessary to be built? What is the best solution for the building, I think.
So the role of them is to be aware of the needs of the people who are going to construct, use the building, and the surrounding.
Yes, impacts that they will have. The good ones and the bad ones, I think.
Love it. Good job. So that kind of is a great summary. So I appreciate that. Let me move into my next slide here. So designers or builders are becoming more facilitators, providers of tools for creating these sustainable solutions. And remember, don't forget that it's not only one person, it's a group, it's a design team, is the building team, right? So that's where you become into to facilitate the process. You are not there to just give the solutions. Even if you have the technical expertise, you're there to help the community, the client, or the final users to come up with that, what is the best, and definitely understanding that there is implications, there is trade-off between CO2 emissions, health impacts, safety, security, all these things that we always think about in our process. So sometimes as designers or builders, we disconnect between our clients or the communities. The more you connect them, the better your solution is gonna be. I don't know how frequently this is applied in Brazil, but here in the United States, we're trying to use a lot of design charrettes where we invite the users, the community to help us to enhance the ideas that we have in terms of the project. So that's something that you should be implementing, which is gonna originate creative solutions, and those solutions are be based on the local knowledge. I think we have been going away from local knowledge a lot. We have been trying to use, because the way we perceive sometimes, okay, this technique is better in this place, I want to implement it in my local, but sometimes you have the best solutions because you have been there for centuries and you know better, the people in that place know better than coming with something else from other place that doesn't really apply to your context. So don't forget that. The other important piece is don't forget about your ecosystem, your biodiversity that you have in your context, and how can you support that when you are creating those solutions. Sometimes probably your community will not understand these concepts, so that's the reason I call this the facilitation process, because you're going to have a better idea how that works, and you can help educate the community, or the community can help you to educate you better to understand what the ecosystem looks like in that context. Because again, most of the time, we don't live in that community where that project is being built. So that's one of the biggest challenges for designers or builders. Do we need new skills? If we have enough time, I will ask you another question, but I'm gonna tell you, yes. We need new skills as designers and builders. We need to better understand not only how concrete works or how the design of the structure works or what the productivity of a crew is or how to estimate a construction project should be done. You need to be a mediator, you need to be a good communicator, translator, depending of the situation where you are. You are the domain expert, depending of the situation we are, but that doesn't mean that you have the right solution. You need to be an expert to link these other people that are part of that project. And also, in many occasions, you will become the political and the economic expert. So all these other skills are so key if you are planning to develop a sustainable project. So That's one thing. This is my takeaways from you, and you can read it. But I just want to open up for questions now, since I have a couple 5 minutes probably to answer questions, Emilia. And I don't know if I'm running out of the time.
No one has questions. It was great your presentation, Rodolfo. Everybody had to read your article. I hope they read it.
And keep in mind the article was from 10 years ago. So there has been a lot of changes that are happening. But anyhow, it has been my pleasure to join your class today and to share some of my knowledge with you. I am not expecting you to be expert after this presentation, but at least I want you to be aware, as Emilia mentioned early on, of the things that we should be consider. Your generation is gonna be helping us to develop solutions for these more complex problems, and you need to be ready for that, and you will. I am sure the education you're getting from Emilia and the rest of the faculty members in your institution is going to help you to support that. But just keep in mind that as a designer or builder, whatever hat you want to take in this situation, don't forget to think about the people that are part of that project, not only the users, not only the client, your construction workers, the community around that project, or even the communities where those materials are coming from, as somebody else mentioned. Again, it's been a pleasure for me to join today. Molto obrigado, if I that pronounced it right. Look forward to connecting with some of you in the future.
Thank you so much, Rodolfo. Have a nice meeting. I know you have another appointment now. And send our love to everyone there. We had wonderful classes from Svetlana, Pinar, Mahmoud, and now you. And Mehmet couldn't give him his time this semester, but tell him the next semester I'm waiting for his class on age.
Yes, and stay tuned for, I think next week you have George presenting, and he has been working with me about some of these concepts, and he's moving the needle into more decision-making process of social sustainability. So I am sure he's gonna be excited to share some of his research.
The student, the master student, is working with Georgia right now, which is Karen, so you know her, and you might be invited as a co-advisor, so I'm just showing you.
Are you sure you want me to be your co-advisor? No, I'm sure.
You can accept her, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay,
we have
perfect.
To find her subject. She just started, and she's not discussing what to study or not, so she's reading us some stuff. So if you have any suggestion of materials for us to read and prepare ourselves for our first conversation with you, let us know.
Yeah, I am meeting with George later today, so we can bounce some ideas.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Have a great day. Bye.